Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. It's Tuesday, time to check out some new releases that are coming out this Friday, May 30th. It's about 500 albums coming out this week. I got 10 on my list for today. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. Like I said in the intro, about 500 albums are coming out this week, but I'm only going to talk about 10 on the show today, so if something you're looking forward to that I don't have on here, make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to grabbing. And like always, if you're unable to find these in your local brick and mortar stores, they should all be available online. I'll put links down below in the comment section for them. You can also always go over to the Vinyl Den store on Amazon. All the pre-orders are on there, new releases, there's deals on records, all sorts of cool stuff to check out. The first album is one I'm kind of on the fence about. So this is Kendrick Lamar, to Pimp, Butterfly. Came out back in 2015. It was his third studio album. 2 LP release. It's a 10-year anniversary edition they're coming out with this week. It's going to run about $40. I think this album is kind of widely seen as one of the best rap albums of the 2010s. I know in 2019, Guardian did a list of the best albums of the 21st century, and To Pimp a Butterfly ended up, I think, as number 4 on that list. I think as great as this album is, I think Damn is probably a little bit better of an album overall. I completely understand why this album gets all the respect it gets, though. It hit number 1 in a bunch of different countries, sold over 1 million copies here in the U.S. 1 million copies doesn't sound like a whole lot, but in the streaming era, 1 million in sales is actually a pretty good number. For this 10th anniversary edition, I think the only difference between this and the standard version of it is this one has alternate artwork, which I already have this on vinyl, so I really don't need another copy of it. Especially for $40. If I could find it for like $25, maybe $28, maybe I'd grab a copy of it. But, it is a great album if you're unfamiliar with it. If you're a rap fan, it's definitely one worth checking out. You also got Mariah Carey, The Emancipation of Mimi coming out this week. So this was released back in 2005. It was our 10th studio album. A couple different versions of this. There's a 2 LP version. It's going to run you about $40. Then there's this big 5 LP deluxe edition. It's going to run you about $250. This is Mariah Carey's big, comeback album, which is kind of funny to say because Butterfly sold, I think it was 4 million copies. Rainbow sold another 3 or 4 million copies also. Glitter and Charm Bracelet were both platinum selling albums. This album would end up selling over 7 million copies. It would be number 1 in a bunch of different countries, including the Billboard 200 here. After the disappointment of her last couple of albums, only hitting, I think it was number 3, number 7, number 2 on the Billboard 200. So I think if that's the dip in your catalog, you're doing pretty well. But, it's an album I haven't listened to in a long time. I don't need a big 5 LP box set version of this. I'll stream it. I think there is some extra material on here. On the 2 LP version, there's an unreleased track. And then on the 5 LP version has 3 additional LPs of all a bunch of new remixes, which I think the new track on the 2 LP version is a remix also. There's a letter to her fans. There's new photos. It all comes housed in this really nice deluxe fold-out jacket. I think all these new tracks are be available on streaming, so always stream it and check it out. There's also a new album from Garbage coming out this week. This is Let All That We Imagine Become the Light. It's their 8th studio album. There's a couple different versions of this are be available. There's a standard black version. There's also an orange version. And then there's a Pearl Sunshine, which is like this off-white color, which is going to be indie exclusive. It's all going to run you around $29. It's their first album in 4 years. Actually, this is only their second album in the last 9 years. Their last album, No Gods, No Masters, it received some pretty mixed reviews. I actually thought it was a pretty decent album. It's nowhere as great as the first couple of albums, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as some of the reviews said it was. The new album is produced by Garbage and Billie Bush, which Garbage has produced all their own studio albums, and Billie Bush has worked with them on the last couple ones. The album was mostly written in 2021 after Shirley had hip surgery, so she was basically bedridden for a while. So she spent that time working on new material. They've already released 2 singles off the new album, which I think are better than a lot of the stuff I heard on No Gods, No Masters. But, it's an album I'm looking forward to checking out this week when it gets released. And then you've also got the new album from Miley Cyrus coming out this week. This is Something Beautiful. It's her 9th studio album. This is a follow-up to her hugely successful 2023 album, Endless Summer Vacation. It's going to run you around $30. So you go back a couple albums to Paper Hearts, which is an album that if you're a rock fan, yes, it is Miley Cyrus, but if you're a rock fan, go back and listen to Paper Hearts. It's got this 80s kind of new wave, kind of synth pop, kind of pop rock kind of sound to it. Even has a little glam rock mixed in there. It's an album that was produced by Andrew Watt, who, he's recently worked with Ozzy Osbourne. He's worked with Eddie Vedder on his solo material. He's with Pearl Jam on their last album. There's also some great cameos on that album too. Joan Jett shows up on there, Billy Idol. But anyway, that's not about Paper Hearts. This is about her new album. But it's a vastly underrated album, so go back and check that out if you haven't listened to it yet. I wasn't a huge fan of Endless Summer Vacation. I know it did really well, had a couple of huge singles off of it, but I'm kind of intrigued by what I hear about this new album. You know, it's got some themes of death on there. There's destruction on there, all the kind of stuff that I want in my music. So, you know, like I said, I'll definitely stream this one and check it out this week. So this week, the Grateful Dead are releasing this huge Enjoy the Ride box set, which it was limited to as a 60 CD box set. It was, I think it was like $600 when it was first released, or when it first went up for pre-sale. I think there's only like 6,000 copies of it that were made, and it's all sold out. If you go online and look, they're already going for like $1,200 and $1,400 on eBay. The 60 CD box set contains either full or partially recorded concerts from, I think it was 1969 all the way up to 1994. Like I said, that's all completely sold out. So if you want to get a copy of that, you're going to spend either a lot of money or you're going to get this new 6 LP. It's almost like a compilation of that box set on vinyl. It's called The Music Never Stopped. It's going to run you about $150. Yes, it doesn't have all the same music that's in that big box set, but it does have at least one track from each of the concerts that are on there. So you end up with 27 tracks across the 6 LPs. And it's essentially just like a greatest hits compilation of the 450 tracks that are on that big 60 CD box set. But you're either going to drop, you know, $1,200 or $1,400 on that CD box set, or you could pick this one up for $150. I know $150 is a lot, but like I said, it is 6 LPs. Comes in this really nice jacket also. So if you want some of these tracks on a physical format, you're either going to drop, you know, $1,200, $1,400, $1,500 on the big box set, or you can pick up the 6 LP $150 set. Hopefully it's available on streaming. I'm not the biggest Grateful Dead fan, but I at least love to check out the stuff that's on this 6 LP version of it. You know, so I'll add it to my list to stream and check out this week. You also get Billie Eilish, Hit Me Hard and Soft coming out. So there's a reissue of the 2024 RSD Black Friday isolated vocals version of Hit Me Hard and Soft. It's going to run you about $33. I know the RSD version was on, I think it was like bone vinyl, and this looks like it's going to be on the same color. A lot of times when you get the reissue of RSD releases, it's not on the same color or won't have quite the same artwork, but this looks like it's going to be the same release. And this isolated vocals version, I think really showcases how powerful Billie's voice really can be. And sometimes it gets lost in some of the studio versions or the full versions of those songs. So when you isolate just her vocals, you can hear how good of a vocalist she really is. This isn't completely, you know, without music though. There's a couple parts during some of the songs where you could hear some of the instruments kind of break through, which is a little disappointing, but you know, I think they do as good of a job as they can do with it. You know, a lot of the times these isolated vocal albums I think are kind of a gimmick. I do love going on YouTube though and watching like there's a bunch of Freddie Mercury isolated vocal tracks on there that I love checking out. I don't know if I need an entire album of it though, but it's getting reissued this week. There's a couple of really interesting Bill Evans albums getting released this week. Both of them are part of the Craft Recordings Original Jazz Classic series, which they're always mastered by Kevin Gray from the original analog tapes. They're pressed to RTI. They always sound fantastic. They're both going to run you about $39. First album is Moonbeams, came out back in 1962. So this is the very first recording sessions that Bill Evans had after the death of Scott LaFaro the year before 1961. If you're unfamiliar with Scott, he was a pioneering bass player in jazz music in the late 50s and early 60s. And Bass Player Magazine, which I didn't even know was a thing until recently, but Bass Player Magazine listed him as the 16th greatest bass player of all time. And over these recording sessions, the Bill Evans trio would record enough material to release 2 full studio albums. All the like ballady tracks would end up on Moonbeams, and then the more like upbeat stuff would all end up on How My Heart Sings, which actually wasn't even released until 1964. Of course, Bill Evans is known as one of the greatest jazz musicians of all time. Moonbeams is a really good album. It's not one of my favorites from him, you know, but it's one that's definitely worth checking out if you're looking to get into jazz music. And then the second one is Interplay. So Interplay was released in 1963. Same thing. It was all mastered by Kevin Gray from original analog tapes. Pressed to RTI, it's going to run you about $39. So even though the recording sessions that would become Interplay were recorded shortly after the ones that they would get Moonbeams from, it was recorded with a completely different lineup. So Bill Evans only worked as a trio from like the mid-60s, from the mid-50s until the mid-60s, which is like his classic period. He only worked with trios. There's only 2 times that he worked as a quintet. One of them is for Interplay, and then the other one, he wasn't the leader of the other quintet. It was more like Cannibal Adderley was the leader. He was part of the ensemble. So this is really like, this is really the only quintet album from that period from Bill Evans. And he put together an incredible lineup on this one. You got Freddie Hubbard on here, Jim Hall, Percy Heath, Philly Joe Jones on drums. It's a great lineup for a great album. And then in 1982, they were to release the Interplay sessions, which is all the music from the recording sessions, which I'd love to see them do a full vinyl version of that also. Neither one of these are my favorite Bill Evans albums, but they're both, I think they're definitely both better than a lot of the other jazz that was coming out in the late 50s and early 60s. I think when it comes to like overall quality for jazz albums, at least new jazz albums, the Blue Note Tone Poet releases are typically like, I put them up at the top. Those are always going to be like your best sounding versions, but these original Jazz Classic Series recordings are just a notch below that. And then rounding out the list this week, you got a couple of releases from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. The first one was Brain Salad Surgery. Came out back in 1973. It was their fourth studio album. It's going to run you about $28. This is one of the more iconic album covers of the 70s. It was all put together and designed by H.R. Geiger, who would go on to create the alien that would be used in the Alien movie franchise. But when this album first got released, it was met with some very mixed reviews. And it's an album that I think looking back on, now, 50 years later, it's slowly become one of the more beloved progressive rock albums of that era. And this is an album that, outside of a picture disc release, has not been reissued since 2016. I'm not really sure which version of this album is coming out this week. There's been a couple of different remixes over the years. I think the Andy Pierce version, is kind of the standard version, even though I think the Jacko remix is the one that was included in the box set, was that 2014 when that came out, and a couple of releases since then. So just kind of keep that in mind if you're going to look to grab a copy of that this week. And then the last album I got on the list is Pictures at an Exhibition. So this came out back in 1971. This is a live album from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. It was recorded on March 26, 1971 in Newcastle in England. It's going to run you about $28 also. So this is not your usual kind of live album. So this performance was a progressive rock adaptation of Pictures at an Exhibition, which is a piano piece from composer, I'm always terrible with this name, Modest Mussorgsky, I think is how you pronounce his name, but this is written back in the 1870s, and the band had been performing some of his pieces over the last year or so before doing this performance, and then decided to make an entire concert out of this one piece. The album did surprisingly well here in the US. It hit number 10 on the Billboard 200. It sold a ton of copies, and the only track on here that wasn't part of that piano suite is a track called Nut Rocker. It finishes out the album, and it's a progressive rock version of the Nutcracker. If you haven't heard it, it's definitely one worth checking out. I'm not a big Emerson, Lake and Palmer fan, but this is actually a really good show, really good concert to listen to. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to grabbing this week. There's definitely some stuff. There's a lot of stuff on here that I'm going to stream this week. So I'm definitely going to stream the new Garbage album. I'll stream that new Miley Cyrus album also. I'll kind of give that a chance. I might grab that Kendrick Lamar to Pimp a Butterfly 10th anniversary edition. Like I said, I already have a copy of that on vinyl, so I don't need to have another copy of it, but we'll see what I end up grabbing this week. I'll probably grab, if I'm going to grab one of those Bill Evans albums, it's probably going to be Interplay. And there's also a couple other ones I'm sure I'm going to check out, but let me know what you guys are looking forward to. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.